Devlin, Untamed.
5, 4, 3, 2, 1.
The Platform.
Welcome again to the podcast, or if this is the first time that you've joined us, welcome to the podcast, iOS, It's Only Sport. That's the name of our daily radio show on the platform. My name is Martin Devlin, alongside Lachlan Waugh. We do 3 hours of radio every weekday, the only independent daily sports radio show in this country. Today on your podcast, Mark Watson, ATM, the Apologise to Me, episode 72, talking first round of Super Rugby, rest and rotation, now seeping into cricket, smart mouth guards, and perhaps the best, most nonsensical piece of management speak BS yet offered up by NZR CEO Mark Robinson. We had an Aussie perspective on the first Super Rugby round ahead of the second round, which is exclusively in Aussie in Melbourne. And our man, Geoff Parks, works for the Raw out of Melbourne. Who'd be a coach of a professional sports team in New Zealand, and who'd be a man coaching a female professional sports team in New Zealand right now? Craig Cumming, good old mate. He's had a bit of success over the weekend. What propels you into coaching? Why do you want to do it? What do you get out of it? And when you actually win something, are you allowed into the dressing room to celebrate? Because there are issues around that as well. What is more chance of happening? We played that today. We did the Tide 5. So much sport to talk about in terms of topics and issues. Things like, should the Italians have been allowed to take that kick again versus France, the last-minute penalty in the Six Nations? The answer is yes. The refereeing, well, all of the officials got it completely wrong. And more on the not-so-smart mouth guards as well. We start the show, as always. Tablets in hand, I say gather my flock. It is time for a sermon. I am dreading the first cricket test versus Australia. Let's go to the mountaintop.
We live in an amazing, amazing world, and it's wasted on the crappiest generation of just spoiled idiots.
Glum. I feel glum. 2 days away from day one, first ball being bowled in Wellington, us versus Aussie, test cricket, and I feel completely deflated. Pessimistic in my outlook of what's going to happen both in Wellington and then Christchurch a week later. Us versus Aussie at cricket for me is what it must feel like for a rugby fan in Oz when the Wallabies are about to play the All Blacks. Yes, you have hope, but the overwhelming feeling is hopelessness. We just aren't as good as them. Player for player, they are better. We get the odd one like Kane who could make their side, but most of our players never would or could. If you asked Australian cricket at the moment to pick the very best of New Zealand, would they pick, 2 or 3 players maybe to put on their side? It really is a parallel universe with them and their rugby. They grow up in Aussie playing harder, better cricket than our kids do here in New Zealand. The age groups are more competitive. The domestic game is so much better and bigger and stronger in every way. That's how they're brought up, with a level of excellence, a bar set so much higher than our guys will ever get set. It's just that much more difficult to make their team over there as a player, making ours here, if you get my point. That's just weighted numbers playing the game and hard-out competitiveness. It's a hell of a lot easier as a rugby player in Oz making the Wallabies than a kid here in New Zealand dreaming of becoming an All Black. That's why the Wallabies will never, ever take over from the All Blacks. Maybe a game or two, maybe a season or two. But as long as we retain rugby as our national game, and cricket, like rugby in Oz, isn't the number one participation sport, doesn't attract the best young kid athletes to play it, we're always going to struggle when we play them. We aren't as good as them. That fact made loud and clear again across the T20 series. We really are on a hiding to nothing in these 2 tests, which is why across generations, each and every victory, of which there's only ever been 8 in the last 50 years, is celebrated like a World Cup final win in rugby, because they are equally as rare, which is why I'm so pessimistic. Because in test cricket terms versus Australia, I don't really think it's been pessimistic. I'd call it realistic.
Devlin.
What do you want? We want information. Information. You won't get it.
The Platform.
Doctor, what have we got? Sports news headlines. Set the agenda.
What to start with? I don't know what to start with. Maybe cricket.
Go on.
India have beaten England by 5 wickets in the 4th of 5 tests on their own soil to claim the series. Still with 1 match to play. Is Bazball dead in the water? Probably not. I'll probably keep him on board.
Well, compare it to another sport. Find another sport for me where every now and again you get a victory. So therefore, it kind of legitimised. It's like New Zealand cricket, isn't it? There is enough victories and enough series wins and enough white ball cricket wins.
Yeah. It's a bit like Man United and Newcastle. You lose a lot, but you still sort of win at the same time.
Yeah, and so you don't kind of throw the baby out with the bathwater when perhaps you should.
Interesting quote from Ben Stokes, the captain of England, who came out and said, we didn't have a chance in hell of competing with India, but we still did. We gave them a run for their money. It's probably a way to say that they're not actually a good side. But look, we won a test. Oh, hey, look at us.
Well, in actual fact, the last 2 tests, you were in winning positions in both of those.
But they didn't have a chance in hell, though.
Okay, not a chance in hell.
Apparently. Plenty of praise directed the way of former Black Caps Test captain Daniel Vettori from Australian cricketers. The likes of spin bowler Nathan Lyon have applauded the influence of Vettori, who was part of the Australian coaching staff. If you're Vettori, who do you actually want to win this series? You'd be like, oh, damn, if you lost, but you'd deep down be like, go on.
Well, we've got Andre Adams back on tomorrow. I'll ask him about that because he's coached Australia, he's coached New Zealand, he's coached Bangladesh, coached
big defender of David Warner is Andre Adams.
See what?
Everton's points penalty for breaching Premier League financial rules has been reduced from 10 to 6 following an appeal. Meanwhile, Nottingham Forest's financial breach case will be heard next week, so maybe Forest can get their deduction reduced. There was a Premier League match on this morning as well. West Ham, well, if you talk to Tom Rennie, if you talk to Miles Davis, more so Miles than Tom, then they're not a fan of Moisey. They want him out. But West Ham got another one this morning, 4-2. They've had a couple of losses recently, but did get a win, 4-2, as I say, over Brentford, and they sit 8th on the table. 11 wins, 6 draws, 9 losses, 39 points. They're only 5 points off Man United. Adam Reynolds' contract extension with the Brisbane Broncos has been confirmed. Reports of this last week. We actually heard it first from Andy Raymond, who told us a couple of weeks ago that Reynolds was set to extend his contract by a year. It is a year. He's on the books until the end of 2025 for the Broncos. Here's a lovely story involving Mary Golding, who is a tall fern, a New Zealand basketball representative. In May of 2023, she was critically injured in a car accident just north of Canterbury. Right. Paramedics at the scene didn't think she'd survive her injuries. She spent 12 days in a coma before having to learn to eat, walk and talk again. Well, she's just re-signed with the East Pearl Eagles.
What a brilliant story.
An Australian NBL 1 team. Obviously, this being a significant milestone and the 27-year-old's return to the Black Singlet. Sensational news for Mary Golding. Not a huge amount else going around in the world of sport. It is a Tuesday. I mean, here's a story on the Herald that could be worth a read. New Zealand rugby boss Mark Robinson sat down with members of NZME, shall we say, to discuss all the game's burning questions. One enticing proposition centres on the return of old-school international tours. Apparently, the All Blacks and the Springboks could be returning to those tours and doing them, which is something that I'd like to see. So if you want to read more about that, head along to the Herald website. And I don't think it's paywalled, so it's actually a free read.
Devlin.
Oh my goodness me!
The platform.
The big bombshell in New Zealand sport today, though, was the announcement, and tearful it was, from Neil Wagner that he is retiring from Test cricket. 260 Test wickets, Lionheart. He epitomised everything that we love about sports people in this country. Commitment, desire, showing a bit of mungle, application, sheer enjoyment of representing his country. He's a star. And hope he's not lost to New Zealand cricket. Andre Adams, former Black Cap, joining us to talk about Wags. What does that name mean to you in New Zealand cricket?
Oh, mate, he's a bit of a hero, really, in terms of the way he's gone about things over the last sort of, his whole career, really. I remember when I first saw him, I thought, man, this guy tries really hard, and I wasn't sure that he was fast enough to bowl the way that he wanted to bowl, but he proved everyone wrong. So I think that's testament to his courage and his resilience, his determination. He's been an integral part of a wonderful trio of pace bowlers for New Zealand cricket.
He is 5th on the all-time wicket takers list of New Zealand cricket. Isn't that incredible? It's 260.
Yeah, I mean, he's, if you looked at Wags and you asked him, you want to know how old he was, you wouldn't think he was 37. He takes good care of himself, and that's how he's been able to take so many wickets, play so much Test cricket, so many first-class games. And I remember his style when he first started. Everyone was like, "Oh, you've got to swing the ball, and you've got to do this, and you've got to do that." But he's just gone about it his own way, and he's been amazing.
Andre, before he got into the Black Caps and he was playing for Northern Districts and then he played for Otago and stuff, what was he like? Did you ever run into him as just playing provincial cricket?
Yeah, he was, mate. What you see for the Black Caps is exactly the same as he was playing first class cricket. We first ran into him. He first went to Otago, I think, was his first port of call, and he just ran in all day, really. And you sort of felt with him that he would go away. You sort of hoped he would go away, but he never did. Even when it didn't go his way, he just kept coming back at you. And I remember that sort of standing out as the thing that sort of got me was. No matter how hard it's going to get, this guy will just keep doing it and doing it and doing it, and I guess that's how he made his way in Test cricket. He swung it a little bit. In fact, he probably swung it more when he first started than he did throughout most of his career because of the length he bowled. But he certainly could swing it. But he was just so effective slapping it in, and he made middle to lower order batters very nervous, and so he got a lot of wickets in first class cricket by cleaning up numbers 5 down.
He played in the World Test Championship side. He's got that always, and 260 Test wickets you can never take away from him. All right, the way he bowled, though, short-pitched, leg side, and never at a hell of a clip. And I've always thought if there was somebody doing that to us, we would have a different reaction to him as a cricketer than we have with Neil. So how do you kind of put a perspective on that or pigeonhole that in terms of his career, the way that he bowled, which did, of course, raise eyebrows every time he did attack the batsman like that?
Oh, okay, yeah. How do I look? It's funny, we have all these unwritten rules, and so many sports have these unwritten rules about what you can and can't do. And even in cricket, if the batters, which is crazy, if the umpire feels like the batter's in danger, then they can actually ask you to stop doing it. But it's like that's the game, isn't it? That's why fast bowling is, because you're always in danger. The batter is always in danger. So how was he perceived? I like the fact that he did it and he just kept doing it his way. And we probably wouldn't have liked it if someone had done it to us. So I think probably if you think about how the West Indies did things earlier, or sort of late 80s, I think they bowled a lot of short balls, maybe not with the same field sets, and certainly not as intentional as Wags was. The big thing with Wags is Wags actually made you make a decision every ball when he was bowling short, and I think that's the difference between what he does and what a lot of people have done is he puts fielders in a position where you can't just knock it up in the air. You can't basically miss-hit the ball. You have to be absolutely perfect every time you play the short ball. And even with that lack of pace, as you say, I think it's the body language and the intent and the story that he tells the batsman is that I'm in charge and you're just waiting to get out. The overwhelming feeling, I think, from New Zealand cricket fans is going to be, look, he's a lion heart. You just knew what you're going to get. There's courage, there's determination, there's application there. He's never, ever going to not give his absolute all. Keeps himself in great shape, as you say. And he's just going to come in and he's just going to bowl all day. And if you throw him the ball, he's going to bowl all day. And he's just one of those guys. He just must be, I suppose what I'm trying to say, the ultimate teammate, isn't he? Well, I think he is in terms of when you look at that setup and you say Tim Southey swing bowler, Trent Boult swing bowler, and then you've got Wags who just runs in and you're a weapon with the old ball. He's not just a weapon with the new ball. He's a weapon with the old ball, and the way he bowled was very selfless, and that basically he broke his finger one game and soldiered on through. I think it was 2016. He did that. He broke his hand and managed to soldier on through. I think I love the fact that the lasting memory of Wags will be him taking that wicket.
Against England.
I think that sort of summed up absolutely everything about him. When you look at the pictures afterwards, the images of him, roaring about the victory, I think that, if you could sum him up as an athlete, that would be it right there on those pictures.
The Tight Five.
5 separate sporting topics, roughly a minute or so on each. We discuss when the bell reminds us, we move quickly on to the next topic. I want to talk about goodbye Baz Ball. India are up 3-1 in that series. What does it mean for Brendan McCullum as coach of England? Or are they winning enough games and playing cricket that's attractive enough that, they'll just say, oh, well, we had a chance and we didn't have it. Neil Wagner, your relationship with him as a Black Caps fan. How's he going to be remembered, Lachlan? Should Paolo Garbisi have been allowed to retake that kick, France versus Italy in the Six Nations? Everton's financial fair play punishment has been reduced from 10 points to 6. Is that fair? And the Fox League commentators have picked who they think are going to win the NRL. And you're shaking your head here because some of those picks, especially for Mick Ennis for a start, you got to say, what? Are you on the edibles, mate? I mean, what? You, honestly, if you haven't heard this, people, you're going to absolutely love it. Here we go. 5 separate sporting topics, kicking it off with cricket and goodbye Bazball. Or not. England won that first test, if you remember. Super Sunday it was. The Windies beat Australia, and then after that, England beat India in India, and you thought, hell, what a couple of great games of test cricket. From there, India won the second test convincingly. From there, the third test, they racked up a good first innings total of over 400, but the Poms were 224 for 2 and then threw their bats away and lost that test. And in the fourth test, they batted first, got about 340 on the back of Joe Root. India's tail wagged. They couldn't get them out, and they probably scored another 150 runs more than they should have, India. And then England were all out for 145 and Bazball themselves again out of that test. So is it an unfortunate experiment, or do you think England cricket are going to stay with the coach and stay with the style?
They'll stay with it.
At least until the Ashes. Is it this year or next year? Is it this year's Ashes?
It's the end of next year.
End of next year. Geez, that's a long coaching tenure if he stays that long.
End of next
for any
year?
cricket coach.
It's in the Australian summer, so...
Well, that'll be this year, won't it?
2025-26, I think.
Is it?
Because the last one in Australia was 2021-22. Oh, it could be this year.
No, okay, all right. Hang on.
Next Ashes series. I just don't think they would because they've had some success with it. According to this, the next Ashes series is in England in 20... Oh, no, the next one in England is in 20... No, when's the next one in Australia? 2027.
What?
I don't know.
They're not waiting that long, mate.
No, I know.
I say
2025, I was right, 2025, 2026.
Okay, so it's a couple of summers away. I'd say that they stay with him.
I just think it's a brash style that's backfired on many occasions, but it's also got them a number of wins. And I think the win, if he gets to a point where Brendan McCullum, where he has to vouch for his job security and try and keep it, he would say, "Look, I've won all these tests. You know, my win percentage is good." And they'll say, "Yeah, you've lost some." It's like, "Yeah, but I've won some."
But look, he's brought a lot of excitement to the game as well.
And headlines and attention as well.
There you go, yeah. And
there's eyes on them.
That's it. And I think that has got a lot to do with it. So it must be frustrating as an England cricket fan, because if you just added a little bit of temperance to the style...
I think a lot of people like it, though.
Yeah? Just thrash the bat at everything?
Well, because it's just different. It's strange, and it makes for an entertaining test.
Okay, well, here's your question then. Do you want New Zealand to play like that on Thursday, or do you just want New Zealand not to lose the test? I wouldn't care if we batted all day for 200. I just don't want us to get dicked by Aussie. No,
I don't want to get dicked, but I want us to show something. Show a bit of fight. Don't do what the Chelsea team did in extra time yesterday against Liverpool and just sit there and wait. We've got to do something.
I opened the show by saying that I was pessimistic, and then I corrected that and said I was realistic. Right now, are we winning the first test at the Basin Reserve? I'm going to ask you later on the show. Are we winning it right now?
Well, my gut says no.
I'm not arguing.
Yeah. So
Neil Wagner.
But actually, just quickly, we can't let the T20 series impact the Test series because they're different formats, different teams.
That's right.
And I think we care a lot more about...
So competitive against Australia in the Test arena too, aren't we? They've won 15 out of the last 16 again, Lachlan, okay? They've won 9 out of the last 10 in New Zealand. We haven't won one since
2011. We've won one in the space of 30-something years.
Yeah, 1 in 28.
1 in 28.
So it's not a great track record. Wags comes on to bowl. I've always loved Neil Wagner bowling for New Zealand. If he was bowling for any other country, I would despise him as a cricketer because that leg side... half-pace bouncing stuff.
Yeah.
Look, if you're bouncing guys in cricket, at least do it at 145 and scare the living crap out of them, right? When you're doing it at 130, there's a bit of a try-hard element to it. But because he's doing it for us, I'm a complete hypocrite about it.
Yeah,
I love his attitude and I love what he brings.
I remember in his last Test series the last one we had against Australia, when he was bowling those bounces to Matthew Wade and he was just getting whacked in the arm, and then they were just staring each other off, and there's Wags on the other end of the wicket just smiling away and then doing press-ups.
That's right. He was doing press-ups. That's right. Remember when he came out to bat against Sri Lanka and he had the groin injury and he was doing those, whatever those ones are, you put your foot up behind your back kind of thing, whatever those stretchy things are. Crunches or something. I don't bloody know.
Yeah, crunches? Or lunges.
Lunges or whatever. Yeah. He was doing that.
He's entertaining.
He is.
When he plays and even the elements around him on the field.
Yeah.
He's
If you
entertaining.
meet him as well, he's just a good guy. I mean, look, more power to your Wags. 260 Test wickets for New Zealand. That's a hell of a total, mate. There's not that many that have got more than that. Everton, the punishment of 10 points reduced to 6. Is that fair?
Well, it seems so, because 10 points felt a bit damn harsh for a club that, sure, they might have overspent, but it can't have been by that much. And
Well, I see. The caveat I put on this is no, it's not, or yes, it is. It all depends on what happens to Man City. And the fact that Everton's appeal has been successful and theirs has been reduced, the first thing I thought was, that means Man City are going to, 115 charges are going to be reduced to 25 charges for a start, aren't they?
And instead of getting relegated from the top division,
Instead of their
you'll just
titles being stripped off them.
You'll get a 10-point penalty. Like, oh, great, so now they only get 90 points as opposed to 100. Okay. They still win the league? Yeah, okay.
Yeah, and anyway, Everton, by the way, people, have got more charges to face, which are going to be heard once the season finishes.
Are they trying to build a new stadium?
They are, and so if they get further penalised at the end of the season, and I was reading this on the BBC website tonight, and I thought, you've got to be bloody joking. They could survive relegation, then get those points docked, and apparently the official certificates don't get signed by the clubs and handed until sometime in May, so they could be rewritten, and they could get relegated even though they don't get relegated. ATM, apologise to me, Watto! The thing I love about Mark is he's forthright, he's opinionated, he says what he thinks. And increasingly in New Zealand sport, it is cheese, it is PR. A lot of the reporting these days, you kind of think it was actually done by the sports people, the organisation itself. The thing I love about sport is the debate, the opinions. You don't have to be right or wrong. It doesn't matter. Just bring the issue and all. Let's have a good old chinwag about it. That's what he brings, Watto. Let's get this one off our chest to start with, shall we? Because Lockie Ferguson brought up a great point by not playing the third T20 for the Black Caps against Australia, a point that you and me bang on about most weeks, and we still have to hit this drum and hit it loud because no one seems to be listening still. Lockie Ferguson bowled 8 overs across 3 days, then he gets rested for the third T20, even though he's not playing the test matches and the domestic season has finished to manage his workload. I'll give you a list of other names so that we can double up the discussion. Sam Cane, Brodie Retallick, Beauden Barrett, Adi Savia, Aaron Smith, Richie Mwanga, Shannon Frizzell. All 7 of these men started the World Cup final. All of them are playing 80 minutes apart from Beauden, who's injured at the moment, in Japan, quite happily playing rugby, Mark. Yet our All Blacks here, including some of them that didn't actually play at all in France for the last few weeks, have to have managed workloads for Super Rugby. So those two things to me are now atypical, mate. Sorry, this is a long-winded question, but bear with me. That we are now just getting dumbed down as sports fans in this country, and we get spoon-fed this continual narrative so that we're now meant to believe that it's better that the players don't actually play and that they are rested all the time. And the amount of fights I have on social media about this, where people just continually peddle that line at me. Oh no, they need their rest, they need their rotation. Why have all of a sudden so many people been sucker punched into believing that this is actually real again?
Look, it's just PowerPoint presentation, be it sports scientists who seem to somehow think that, you know, everybody falls into the same box. I mean, you know, scientists once told us the earth was flat, mate, and we pretty much later on proved that's not the case. Look, it just blows me away. Just this, we wonder why crowds don't tune up anymore. Well, no one's tuning up because no one is actually playing. You know me, Martin. I mean, I come from an Ironman triathlon background. I've been lucky enough to work with some of the best athletes in the world. And, mate, you should see the workload these guys put themselves through. And people will argue, oh, yeah, but you don't have the gladiatorial contact in those sports. Well, I'll encourage anyone to try and go and run 100 miles a week and see what impact that has on the body. I mean, Peter Snell did I think 6 to 8 weeks continuous, only once of 100 miles a week, just how tough that is. And I know guys that are doing that, cycling, swimming, doing all of these things. I just had my young daughter down at the Surf Life Saving Nationals for under 13s down at Mount Maunganui over the weekend. Huge event. These kids were racing 12 times a day sometimes, absolute, not even thinking about it, backing it up the next day. And, you know, as a little kid, you grow up, Martin, and you say to yourself, oh, please, I don't want it to be running. I don't want it to be cancelled. Don't substitute me off. I want to play.
I want to play.
And all you want to do is play. You've got a ball before school. You've got a ball during the interval break, the lunch break after school. You're having all these ad hoc games. And then suddenly you get to a professional level and you're told you don't want to play, or you make out you don't want to play, or you're going to get tired. You know, you mentioned the cricket. We need to beat Australia. We can't just go, oh, well, look, we'll rest and rotate. And these whole World Cups, everything's always about, oh, yeah, but we're developing for the World Cup. No, just win games in the here and the now. I'll keep saying it, Martin. Show me where rest and rotation has helped the All Blacks. We didn't win the last World Cup. We didn't win this Rugby World Cup. There is no science that backs it up at all. Well, historically, we've gone on. We've talked the likes of Jeraine Kona. We've talked the likes of Kevin Mialamu and how when they did play full seasons of rugby, they were actually stars of those Rugby World Cups. There is no data to back this up. The only data that I'm seeing, Martin, a crowd starting to fall away, people becoming apathetic, and people just not caring anymore. Billboards around Auckland, come and watch the Blues, and they've got these marquee players put up on these big billboards, and you're going, yeah, but if I tune up, are they actually going to be playing? Am I actually going to see them play? Because it's basically fraudulent. It's like, yeah, you two are playing, but Bono's not going to be there, but we've got a replacement for him. So they are singing the same songs, but it's not going to be quite the same, but it's still you two. I mean, mate.
It's frustrating, isn't it, mate? It's frustrating because we continually seem, and look, I'm going to play you this, and this is the right time to play you this Mark Robinson quote. Have a listen, ladies and gentlemen. It's just extraordinary. A man who can sit there and stare down a camera and say absolutely nothing and convince himself that what he's saying is actually worthwhile and is somehow going to contribute.
Talk about how we can be more nimble and agile in this space. I think we are really hoping we get into the forum and we just create the best possible forum for decision making. So, I don't want to sit here and promise what the outcomes are going to be here, but we need to make sure we have the right information, right people in the room, the right insights, right level of, the balance of, fan focus and what the fans want and player safety, for instance. And then we come out of there with a really unified approach to move quickly to address some of the things we're talking about.
Well, first thing the fans want, firstly, by the way, mate, I don't think you really need to sit in a room. The fans just want, firstly, your players playing every week. They don't want the game refereed in slow motion in replay. But I just interesting, when he does find the space, will that mean the players get more space? We as fans get more space in the grandstand, and eventually we do move into that right space. Will we see Neil Armstrong in space, or is that a different space, Mark?
So the whole point of this IRB meeting or World Rugby meeting, where they all fly business class, they do their 5-star hotels, they all clip the ticket, they don't pay for a single drink or they don't pay for a single eat, they don't actually spend any of their own money, and they're going there to decide whether or not the right space is in space to have a meeting to talk about the fact that this is going to be a great meeting. I've never heard such gobbledygook, and this guy is an absolute master at it. And here they are with all the problems World Rugby has at the moment, and what they want to do is sit around, hold hands, and make sure that everyone agrees that this is the right way to hold hands. It's just extraordinary, isn't it? And what's even worse is when you see a guy like John Kirwan, who loves his rugby so much, sits there nodding his head to this. No, at what stage does he look Mark Robinson in the eye and go, dude, what are you actually saying?
Martin, just don't get me started on the whole Sky thing. I mean, they are just a vehicle, a PR firm. Here they are now giving free rugby back to people because they're trying to create some sort of advertising revenues, and they wonder why, mate. I've said this every week. Here's a company that have invested $500 million on a product that no one's watching, and they're complicit in it by the fact that they don't create any discussion, don't ask the hard questions, don't get us standing around the water coolers actually talking about it. Rugby was never more popular when we did have controversy. When are they going to realise that when, man's defeats are on the front pages, man's victories are on the back, that we want to hear about it, we want to have the discussion? I mean, seriously, I just hope when Mark Robertson's there sitting there talking about the space that he does get to beat Buzz Aldrin, that he does get to meet all of those that have walked on the moon before him, mate, because I tell you what, mate, these guys are just...
honestly,
they're the ultimate politicians, aren't they, Martin?
That's what they are. They don't actually run sports organisations anymore.
They can sit there to them while they're up there and tell us about how, the social media numbers for the game are just through the roof, and we shouldn't just look at the crowd numbers, and that the women's rugby is just going to save it, and what a wonderful product that is. And mate, honestly.
To hear the full interview, download the platform at the App Store. Via Platform Plus, you can go back and listen to the whole show and all of the interviews in full. Here we go. It's time to play. Good sense or nonsense? 7 separate rugby league experts on Fox Sport have chosen who they think are going to win the NRL this year.
We need to talk. We need to talk.
Kicking it off with Mick Ennis And he's choosing Manly.
Yeah, Michael Ennis, by the way, who won a premiership in 2016 with the Cronulla Sharks, pretty well regarded man in rugby league, known as a bit of a niggler and a sledger on the field.
Annoying player, apparently. Everyone else that used
Very
to play
good, though.
against him.
Very smart, I think. I think he's a smart guy.
And we've
He's
had him on
picked
the show
Manly.
before.
Yeah, we had him on the show before. You're right.
He has picked Manly.
So there's their pick, and then there's a thing called bold prediction, and this is what he says under bold prediction, Michael Ennis. I expect another extremely tight competition. We will see a real reshuffle to last year's top 8 with Manly, Parramatta and Souths to return to finals series, with Manly to win the NRL Premiership in 2024.
Cooper Cronk has gone Roosters.
No shock there. Yeah.
Well, it's no shock, but I think
Played
that
for them.
is that a possibility or is that utter idiocy? I think it leans towards possibility.
More so than idiocy, yeah.
The Roosters have always got cash,
Players.
resources.
They got a premiership winning coach 3 times.
Last year, if you remember, in the last 7 or 8 weeks of the season, they were out, they were almost in, they were just about out, they were in, they were out, they made it.
Yeah. And they won their first game of the finals against Cronulla.
Yeah, and you always thought that, and Cronulla were ranked higher, then you always thought with them, though, that they're one of those teams that they could, right? They're the little engine that could last year. They will get better, do you think?
Well, they're a funny one because I actually think the Roosters could slip out of the 8. I think it could go the other way because they have been one of those teams for about 3 or 4 years now that everyone has said, oh, they've got the talent, they've got the players, they've got the coach, but they've always fallen short of what people expect. And all of that talent that they have is getting older. It's another year with it. I mean, they have signed Dominic Young, a really good young winger, but there's not a lot to suggest, at least from the last couple of years, that they're going to all of a sudden hit the ground running and be a premiership career again. But maybe that's wishful thinking because I don't want the Roosters to be good.
Brian Fletcher has chosen the Roosters. I like Fletch. We've had him on the program before.
Also
too.
once played for the Roosters.
He was always going to choose the Roosters,
Yeah.
right? Okay. So let's move on to Corey Parker, who has chosen the Broncos. Utter nonsense, mate. Utter nonsense. You've
we made
lost
the grand
K4,
final.
mate. Your players are fighting each other, getting drunk in people's backyards.
That's just a couple of boys having a bit of a biff. There's nothing wrong with it.
You've got Reece Walsh, who's got the biggest head in the competition.
They all have big heads, mate. Jerome Luai's head's bigger than his. Come on. You don't like Luai. You know that's true.
How many points were you up in the grand final?
No, we're not talking about the grand final.
How many minutes were there to go?
I'm not
Give me
talking
the
about
points
the grand
versus
final.
minutes ratio.
I'm not talking about the grand
You were up by
final.
28 points. There was 9 minutes left.
I'm not.
This was
No,
the Atlanta
no.
Falcons versus the New England Patriots is what it was. You got Tom Brady by Nathan Cleary. That's the truth. I don't even think a hard-ass Broncos fan like yourself genuinely believes that you're going to overcome that hurdle. I see you slipping backwards this year with that weighing around your neck like a self-choker hold because that's what it was.
I'll say this. I'll say this.
All right. I'll say
Very talented young side we are.
Yes.
Exciting, explosive
Yes.
attack. And I said it last year, it's one of the best attacking sides I've ever seen in my 15, 16, 17
Read
years of
the
watching
top
the NRL.
text.
I'm not reading it. I
Read
saw
it out.
I saw it. I'm not reading it.
Thank you, Texter. The Broncos are joking.
If 2015 set us back about 6 or 7 years, then last year is absolutely going to set us back.
Yeah, that's what I fear, mate. That's what I fear. Taking the piss aside, I do fear that. That's what I fear. Yeah.
But in terms of the game that we're playing here, it's not nonsense to suggest the Broncos are going to win the premiership.
That's
There is
fair.
sense in
that is fair. Hindy is picking
Parramatta?
He is picking
himself.
The Roosters. Which I think for Nathan Hindmarsh is a disgrace. He's got to back his own Eels, doesn't he?
No, they didn't make the finals last year, mate.
Yeah, but how...
The coach is on the hot seat. They haven't retooled their roster to be good enough to suggest, oh, here we go, the Eels are back.
They had a roster last year that should have been in the top 8.
Yeah, they did lose a couple of guys, though.
But they're a team, Lachlan, that if they don't make the 8 again, they become the Bulldogs, is what they do, don't they?
Yeah, they do. The thing with the Eels is that they actually have been on a brilliant run. So in 2019, 20, 21, 22 made the finals.
They're the nearly men. They're the nearly men. They're the nearly men.
So many years, that's the thing. They either overachieve out of nowhere and then, with the expectation, they sort of fall back a bit from expectation. My favourite one is in 2017, they made the top 4. They I think one win from a grand final. They might have they might have got to the second round of the final series. Either the next year, they were wooden spooners with the same team. Anyway, but The Roosters, again, a bit like Brian Fletcher, there is sense in suggesting it, but I don't think they're going to be that good this year.
Blocker Roach, and I love the fact that every time you hear Blocker, his voice is like this. He's the size of a freight train. It's like Mike Tyson. He speaks in a little baby voice. It's kind of like the little nerd in the corner. God,
David Tua.
Got your big voice, mate. He's gone. Blocker has gone the Broncos. Well, he's not going to pick his old Balmain / Tigers side, is he?
No.
No.
Well, is he like you and he actually hates them?
I wouldn't be surprised. I think I'd be amazed that there's a genuine Balmain fan who was actually happy about that.
Who is as much a fan of the West Tigers as he was Balmain.
And finally, Brandy Alexander has gone Penrith.
Yeah, well, of course he has, because it's the Panthers and he played for the Panthers.
Yeah, but they've also won 3 in a row, Lachlan. And have they lost anyone? Luai leaves next year, so they've essentially got the same side. They've got the same coach.
They have lost someone. Who have they lost? They lose someone every... Stephen Crichton, that's who.
Okay, but they...
One of the best centres in the game.
They
He's
lost...
now the Bulldogs.
What, Curacao, and who else did they lose the season
Curacao, Kiko.
Okay, and...
They weren't as good by the numbers, but they still won the premiership.
There you go. And they played their best league when it mattered most.
Tell you what, if that was, say... the Melbourne Storm, dare I even suggest someone like Souths or the Roosters or even Parramatta with a 16-point lead in the grand final with 16 to 17 minutes to play. Was it 16 points? It was 16 points. The Panthers don't win that premiership. I think they were lucky that it was a team who hadn't been in the grand final for many, many years. Very young team.
And they knew how to win.
Yeah.
Having said that, a lot of those Broncos are Origin players, mate. They've had big-time game experience.
Yeah, but I mean, like Payne Haas is still only about 22, 23. Not Kurt Capel. Pat Carrigan is about 22, 23 as well. Reece Walsh is still a teenager. Ezra Mam's a teenager pretty much. Adam Reynolds, as much as he's won a grand final before and been to 2, hasn't got a huge amount of successful finals experience apart from those wins.
Super Rugby. First round. The pluses, the minuses. Well, I think the opening game between the Chiefs and the Crusaders was a crackerjack, but it was always going to be. It had to be. If that game didn't kick off the campaign, well then, what else? Because those are the two best teams. But from an Australian perspective, what Aussie rugby fans think about it? What do they get out of it? In terms of this competition, how much interest is there in Australia? Geoff Parks writes for The Raw out of Melbourne. The Magic Round is in Melbourne this weekend. He joins us. What at an Australian perspective on what you saw, what you thought, what your highlights and lowlights were from Super Rugby's first round?
Well, I guess the biggest highlight was that, rugby's back on. So was for all of us that have been, moping around since the World Cup final, and it was great to have some high quality rugby on, and that started right from the start in Hamilton, and all of us, even over here in Australia, we still a lot of us want to see good rugby, and we got a great opening game. There is a big school here, though, that has switched off from watching New Zealand rugby, and they sort of blame that for some of Australia's woes, that, people, I guess, are just sick of the Crusaders winning and sick of losing to Australian sides. And so there's, maybe half the followers think, well, we should get better, and the other half think, well, we should just play amongst ourselves. And I can see where that comes from because of the domestic strength in AFL and in rugby league. But, it's no answer. Rugby's a global game, and you've got to front up. And is that going to happen this year? Well, based on what we saw from the Australian sides, you'd have to think that, I'm very wary of drawing conclusions from one round, but you'd have to think that things are pretty much normal, that things are the same as they always have been.
Geoff, queer idea, but just in terms of fans, because, and especially Aussie fans, I mean, we saw during the 1990s when the Wallabies were winning World Cups, how popular it was then. Would Australian rugby be better off? And I know it'll never happen at Fishhead level, but if you had two good teams, instead of spreading the Wallaby players over 5 teams and having 5 average sides, or maybe one side, the Brumbies, which is better than the rest, if you had 2 good teams that were really competitive, and that meant on a regular basis over there, Australian rugby fans were seeing their teams beating New Zealand sides on a regular basis, that would drag more. Just to me, by logic, I'd think people would be more interested in watching it. Wouldn't they?
Well, they would be in the cities where the teams are. So if that was in Sydney and Brisbane, and those teams did happen to be more successful, well then sure, you're going to get more people behind those teams. But is that going to really galvanise everyone else that doesn't follow the Waratahs or the Reds or the Brumbies, say, if you had three teams? I mean, the Brumbies have been relatively successful for a long time. They don't draw big crowds in Canberra. The other issue with that, Marty, is that, on any given day, logic says that if you've got more good players in the squad, you're going to have better results. But you can only start 15 and have 23 on the track. And if you've got the next 10 or 12 or 15 guys just holding tackle bags week after week and not getting games, they're not going to stay. They're going to go and play in Japan. They're going to go and play in France. And even if they don't get a first division contract in France, they're going to earn relatively more money playing Pro D2 in France. So, and we saw that when the Force were punted in 2017, and those players and coaches were dispersed amongst the other four teams. So the results didn't get any better, and then a few of those players just headed off overseas. So I'm not sure what looks good on a whiteboard and sounds logical. I'm just not sure that that's going to be how it plays out if it went down that road.
Well, it was fantastic, I thought, to see it kick off on Friday night. It was a hell of a game to start Super Rugby, and all eyes now where you are on the Magic Round this weekend. Last year we saw the attendances in the stadium were pretty poor. Again, it's a great attempt to try and promote it, but what are you genuinely expecting this weekend, crowd-wise and interest and support-wise, out of Melbourne for that round?
Well, I'm expecting just the same as what we've had in the first 2 years. And look, there's a whole lot of reasons for that, and most of them don't have a lot to do with Melbourne. So that event was conceived and by New Zealand Rugby and Rugby Australia, SANZAR, if you like, under that umbrella, and palmed off to an events company, TEG Live. And that company has no connection with the rugby community, with any of the clubs and franchises. They just expect to, put it on Ticketek and have people, knock themselves over to buy tickets like it's a Taylor Swift concert. And it just doesn't happen. And the fact that it's in Melbourne doesn't help. So, there is a lot of criticism about why they're having it in Melbourne. Well, the number one reason is nobody else bid for it. Nobody else wanted it. So everybody's lining up to kick Melbourne about it. But it's not like anyone else took it on and said, yeah, that's a great idea for our city. We'll have that. So, it's a great concept, but it should be a destination event, and it should be marketed as a destination event to each of the franchises and their membership bases, and people should be flying in from all around the country and from New Zealand, like they do for the AFL round and for the Rugby League round in Brisbane. So, in light of that, in lieu of that, with very few visitors coming from outside, there's no way that there's going to be 30,000 turning up each day out of the Melbourne rugby community. It's just not going to happen. But what we will see, if I can swing it around to something a little bit more positive, for the people that go, it is a great 3 days. You get to see 6 high-quality rugby games, all those top players, the best players in the same place at once. The players actually love it. Talking to them, they really love the idea of being in the same city at the same time. So it is a great event, and I've got no question we'll see some great games this weekend.
Coaching. We've all had good coaches. We've all had bad coaches. If you're a parent, well, you've sat on the sidelines and you've watched your kids be coached. If you are a coach or have been a coach, what propels you to decide that you want to do it? And in New Zealand, if you're a man, what are the difficulties in coaching a women's professional sports team? Craig Cumming, former Black Cap, great mate of the show, explains to us just why you would want to do this. What do you get out of it? What are your ambitions at the start of the season? How do you realise those? What is important to you? What is important to the players? And how close can you get to those players? Because the male-female thing, it's a big issue these days in New Zealand. Are you even allowed in the changing room to celebrate when you win a trophy? All of this with Craig. If I'm not okay to say this, you pointed out, but last year you were coach, you did okay. You had to go through the review process again, and it's always a nervous time, isn't it? You got given that job back, and you started with this team for the second year. So at the beginning of the year, Craig, what were you targeting in terms of performance, results, and what you wanted to win?
Yeah, it's always an interesting one, Marty. I've actually done this job now for 4 years, but 2 of them were very part-time because I was working at Otago Boys. And we won this title 2 years ago, but it was when COVID was, hit us and we didn't have any white ferns available, whereas this year it's very different. But, yeah, at the start of the year, it's that balance between, what does success look like? And it's really important that in the women's game, and, I talk a lot, we're still developing. We're still developing young athletes who need to understand what a performance mindset looks like and what performance habits look like. So that's really important when it comes to the long-term goal. But, of course, you want to have success and, you want to be able to do well and enjoy winning games of cricket, because if you're doing that, normally that means you are progressing up the staircase and learn to do things better. And this year, the girls work exceptionally hard. They train morning and night. They do extra stuff, and they're not really paid for it. So their mindsets are fantastic. But we also want to see them progress on the field. But we're also going through a thing, Marty, where they're getting paid a lot more now. So we've got to deal with the pressures that go with, performing. And for the first time ever in the Sparks, we had to leave players out of the 11 and the 12 who were probably good enough in the past to ban it. So there's a whole lot of new stuff we're going through. But for me, the greatest, I suppose, area is seeing players develop. And when I say develop, it's seeing them doing things for the first time that they haven't done out in the middle, or doing it consistently. And this year we've been able to do it. We had to win our last 5 games, Marty, to win the title. We had to win our last 4 to even make the final. So for me, that's a really exciting thing, that I've got players who, can probably handle a bit of pressure. They can handle the do or die of playing the game, and they can actually just focus still on their performance and going out and performing as a team. And they were able to do that, and we had a couple of players in the weekend stand up who have had a bit of a tough Super Smash period where they didn't play as well as they'd like, but they've bounced back, they've learned their lessons, and then on Sunday they played, a couple of players played cameo innings, which were just really, really awesome and so satisfying to see. So there are so many boxes you want to tick, Marty, but as you know, you can't beat winning champagne, and you can't beat sitting at the end of the season, sitting in a circle with your players that you've got a lot of time for and you've worked with, and seeing them smile and celebrate as a team and create a memory, Marty. And I mean it. When you win a title and you have that, 4 or 5 hours afterwards, that's a memory and photos and videos that will never, ever go away, and it's so satisfying to see these girls have that.
Earlier in the year, when you were playing the T20 competition, there was a couple of games there, and I remember one at Eden Park Outer Oval where you had the game an absolute win and you blew it. The players choked it and played some really bad shots. And I remember afterwards you saying how down they felt, how they felt they'd let each other down and all of that kind of stuff. And as a coach, you go through those highs and lows throughout a season. What are you learning about yourself about how to cope with that, and how better to be able to explain to the players that this is the snake that is playing sport? You are going to get these moments, and then resurrect that.
Yeah, and it's been probably in some ways, and you actually, I remember our interview after, the Super Smash, we were chatting about something, and you said to me, what have I learned? And it was actually a really good question, because I actually had been sitting down, and it was a really good marker for me to make sure I'm actually always looking at myself. And my job is to create, along with the other coaches, an environment that allows the players to learn. And when I looked at it, I thought, well, that was actually a failing on my behalf. When we played Auckland and we didn't do it, when we didn't get to the finals of the Super Smash, that was on me, because we had some things happen that I could have helped us probably, learn before we had have the exam before, or had the lesson before the exam. And, one thing I've done actually a little bit different, I've been a little bit more directive, Marty, around certain things when it comes to game plan, preparation. But even during a game, I'm not a big one for sending out messages or for giving instructions. But I have done that a little bit more when I've recognised a situation, because our players don't know everything yet. They're still very young in their journey of being cricketers. They don't grow up playing cricket, 3 times a week like the boys do. So you've got to be a little bit more directive in helping them at times, and that's something I probably haven't done. That maybe I'm doing it a wee bit more. I'm not sending them out with a book, Marty. I don't tell them with instructions. But the other day we were 60 for 3 off 20 overs, and we were digging a bit of a hole batting-wise. And I just sent out a message, hey, go out there and play with some freedom. I don't care if we're bowled out, but we've got to try and score runs. And in the next 2 overs, we hit 24, and then the game changed in that time. And in the past, Marty, I might have just sat back and said, right, come on, girls, come on, and I'm waiting for it to happen. I'm a bit more directive in that, because they just needed a little bit of a confidence boost, and we kick up the bum in some ways, because they'll do what you tell them, and then the rest is history. So, for me, that's a big one, and making sure I do my preparation really, really well so I can help them with their preparation as well.
Craig Cumming is with us, and his Sparks, for the second time in 3 years, won the 50 over domestic competition on the weekend. The awkwardness of a man in a women's changing room, in terms of those celebrations and things, is that ever an issue these days? And if it is, how do you kind of get around all of that?
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, it's still, it's something I asked the players when I first started. What are the rules? What are the do's and what are the don'ts? What do I need to know and what don't I need to know? And I'm very lucky, Marty. I've got a group. I say this respectfully. I've got a group of Southern girls who are pretty relaxed. But you've also got to be very mindful that you're not just. While one person might think it's okay just to walk around, you've got others who might not. So what you do is be really respectful. You ask lots of questions. If you're in doubt, you always ask. And then we've got a couple of rules, that are in place when it comes to after games where if I know they're about to, change after that, we have 10 minutes together, sitting down, and then I can, myself and along with Sean Hicks as my assistant coach, we just pop out of the changing room, and if anything's going to happen or someone's having a shower and that, and you think you're about to walk in, someone will just let you know, give you a yell and that sort of stuff. But you have your boundaries. It's respectful. And, those are the wee things that you work out. But I've got a great team who will be really honest with me. And that also comes around, one thing we're learning as a male coach in the female game around the female body, around menstrual cycles. I'm not embarrassed by it, Marty, and I've got a great group who aren't embarrassed to talk about it, because we're trying to get the best out of our athletes, so we're trying to get them know them better. And to do that, we've got to keep learning, and we've got to keep asking questions, just like the players do. And as I said, I'm very lucky though. When I talk about I'm the coach, I reckon I probably learn more off this group in some ways, Marty, than they do off me, especially around those sort of things. And that's the big part. If you're always looking to grow and learn and get better and understand, I think we all get better. The one thing I'll never compromise, and I think the greatest thing I look back when I played, Marty, all the coaches I had, is what is the number one attribute that all the coaches that I played under, that I loved and I wanted to go out and play for, was that I actually felt like they cared for me as a person. And that's one of my non-negotiables. I want the players to know that I care about them as people and as cricketers. We're going to have good days, we're going to have bad days, but I reckon we can all get off the canvas a little bit easier if we know we've got people around us who care, and that's just a non-negotiable for me.
To hear the full interview, download the platform at the App Store. Via Platform Plus, you can go back and listen to the whole show and all of the interviews.
Devlin.
Unbelievable. Incredible.
The platform.